Alright, welcome back everyone. This week, magic items. How to find them, how to make them, how to craft them, how to use them, and everything in between. We've got potions, we've got scrolls, we've got a bunch of different things, downtime activities, and the revisited rulings and whatnot. It's just there's a whole bunch of hooey. There's a bunch of nonsense. This is why I'm just like, hey, you want to make a thing? Let's do the thing. But I also understand that that can be really upsetting or even infuriating for players of like, can I just get a general idea of like, what are my options? What's the rule set of like, if I want to make this, generally how long would it be? But I'm the kind of person that's like, tell me what you want to do and I'll tell you how to do it. And that works for the most part, at least to start. But sometimes when you have projects like this, you want to get an idea of like, oh, if you wanted to build this, it's going to take you, 5 weeks and 200 gold. Well, now I don't get that time back. Or something. I don't know. So having these generalized rules written down, I suppose, is helpful. I don't know.
They can be. The most important rule to remember is Rule 0, which is, if something doesn't work for your group or whatever, the DM has ultimate control.
This is literally a game about making stuff up. Playing pretend.
Literally, it is. Yeah. So...
And if you can't get that through your thick skull, then we might have to drop your CR.
But
you're the only person that laughs at those kinds of jokes that I make.
It's probably because I'm a little older and, dad jokes are becoming more humorous to me. So...
Well, it's just also not a lot of dungeon masters that I hang out with.
Fair enough.
Okay. You've got a group of 4 level 3 adventurers, and they go into a cave, they get past some traps, they defeat like a big orc or something, and they find a chest that's got a spell scroll in it. What is it? What would you give them? What would it be? How would it work? And how would they use it?
So, the first thing that I would be looking at is what are the magic users in my party? Because if it's a party of just barbarians, then first of all, the scroll is just going to be currency.
Okay, let's say that you've got a cleric and a warlock. Non-traditional magic users.
I would personally pick a spell from either the cleric or the warlock spell list that is of a level that is commensurate to probably a higher level within their list. So, said level 3, so we'll say warlock.
See, I would do the opposite. I would give them something that they don't have access to. I want to give them variety.
So, I would give them a spell that they don't have, personally, but is on the list of spells they could have chosen.
Right, because that's the stinky rule about spell scrolls, is that...
Yes.
If the spell is on your class's spell list, but of a higher level than you can normally cast, you must make an ability check using your spellcasting ability to determine whether you can cast it successfully. Otherwise, casting the spell by reading the scroll requires the spell's normal casting time. Once the spell is cast, the scroll fades. If you are unable to cast it or you fail the check, the scroll fades. The only way to use a spell scroll is if it is a spell from your class, whether or not you have it prepared or known or whatnot. It needs to be something from your class. Which I didn't even know. I just thought you had to be a spellcaster to be able to use spell scrolls, which in and of itself I thought was kind of against the point. You want to be able to give magic items, such as, you know, a flame tongue dagger that has like fire bolts in it, so that people that don't have magic have some magic damage. You know, for those instances where you need magical damage to overcome resistances. But no, apparently these are just free spell slots.
Well, I think that's where different magic items come into play. Because there are magic items that allow people to use spells. Typically, these are higher level magic items, but like you could have say, a greatsword that is enchanted so that the user is able to cast Fireball. And that, you know, in and of itself is a pretty solid thing to give a party. But I would value that higher than I would value a spell scroll. For the simple reasoning of it allows you to do it more than once. And it does allow non-magic users to do that. But with a party that has magic users in it, spell scrolls are very useful for they're not, I don't want to say they're super useful, but they are useful for spell casters, because say I've got an element of a quest line planned that the spell Spider Climb might be useful for. Well, as it turns out, my Warlock doesn't have Spider Climb. So I might have a spell scroll that has Spider Climb that they can use. At that point, I'd be less worried about how much is this worth than kind of like, hey, this is part of a piece of a puzzle. And if they somehow figure out how to do this without using Spider Climb, more power to them. But yeah, one thing that I didn't realize was that the ability to copy and basically add the spell to your spell list was a wizard only thing. I was under the impression that it was all magic users.
Oh, really? Yeah, I thought that was like the one and only good things that wizards can do. But also that's kind of a problem that they have, is that they don't naturally, you know, learn spells when they level up.
Yeah, I think they kind of started doing that fairly recently.
Because that's kind of my big problem that I had of being a wizard, is that you could have... Actually, have you heard of this would you rather? Which is have... Would you rather have endless bacon and no video games, or endless video games and no games? Have you heard of this?
I have not heard that one.
Okay.
That sounds like a baited one.
It is a very popular internet meme, but basically people are like, well, at least I'm going to go for the bacon because then at least I get something.
Yeah.
I think the person that, like, wrote it out did it wrong, and so everyone's just been copy-pasting it everywhere, but... Just the idea of being a wizard where you have access to every spell. Literally any spell in existence. And depending upon the campaign, you may not even be able to get past level 1, because you could just die at any point in time. And the dungeon master is struggling to find a way to balance and keep you, you know, not strong, because you could literally do anything, but you can't do anything because depending if there are any, magic, schools around, or if there's any spell tomes or spell scrolls, you may not be able to get any stronger or learn any new spells. Technically speaking, you could, as a first level wizard, have access to a bunch of different spells, but it really depends on the campaign and what your dungeon master is going to allow.
Yeah, that seems a bit rough.
Yeah. Meanwhile, artificers are just over here, like, flipping the bird to the dungeon master, creating their own magic items. Like, the rules say I can do this. And there's nothing you could do to stop me. Yeah.
Yeah, that...
I miss the good old days of when dungeon masters and players work together to make something.
Well, that's part and parcel, like, you have to have a good group that works with you, and you have to communicate with your group.
Nah,
And
you
they
gotta
want
have
to
dominion.
they have to want to communicate with you.
The dungeon master's got to lay down the law. Oh yeah, that too. Players actually need to show up and talk about stuff. Anyways, we're getting a little bit distracted. Let me give you an example of what I was talking about. There is a wand of magic missile. Can you guess what rarity this item is?
I'd say wand of magic missile, I would say rare would probably be on par.
It is uncommon.
Okay.
It has 3 charges of it. It casts it at first level, but that is basically 3 separate individual hits that automatically hit. And basically you can cast all charges at once if you want, which, is what, casting it at 3rd level does anyways. Oh no, it has 7 charges. You can only expend up to 3 charges at once. And it regains, at the beginning of the dawn, it regains 1d6 plus 1 expended charges. But whenever it is recharging and it hits a 1, then it just is destroyed. So you could use up all the charges and it could, regenerate. Or you could only use up 1 charge and it could still get destroyed. Which is always a problem that I have. But, that's just me. But yes,
Yeah, that's...
looking at this item, it is an uncommon item, which means that it's worth 200 gold pieces. Meaning that it takes 100 gold pieces to craft it, and, let's see. What's the... I don't remember where the, downtime activity for crafting something is. But anyways, a scroll would cost 1 day and 25 gold pieces to craft. So, technically speaking, spell scrolls are the better way to go. The problem is that you have to continuously make them. This, recharges. And also, anyone can use this.
Which I see that as a significant advantage.
Correct.
So...
Do you remember
this
when
particular
only
instance-
spellcasters could use magic items?
I do not.
That used to be a thing. That's why it was in the D&D movie and everything. But only people that knew that spell could use the spell from that magic item.
That sounds absolutely like... That sounds like a terrible thing.
Exactly. Which is why I rule the same thing with both magic items and spell scrolls, is that if someone wants to use a thing, let's do some rolls, let's do some checks, let's see how well it turns out. But I'm not going to, pick and choose based off of, what your heritage is or whatnot. One warlock could literally be a person that grew up in a school and has studied magic, And one warlock could literally be someone from the Feywild, or could be someone that's, got a connection with a dark fiend like Venom or something. And so certain people would have better understandings of different kinds of magic, of like abyssal or like, fairy or whatever,
Yeah.
So giving bonuses based off of the story as opposed to the rules makes more sense to me.
And honestly, I've been kind of doing that myself in a way
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of things because, each character is going to have their own backstory and whatnot, and that backstory is going to help them understand certain things. Like, a thief might have a better understanding of how to sneak around buildings, or they might have an understanding of, hey, this is how criminal underworlds work.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a nope, they might have a better understanding on how to learn languages, or they might have a better understanding of mathematics, which would help them be better, say, artificers.
In a way, when new people learn about D&D and think about the classes of like, oh, a cleric is a healer and a paladin is a fighter, and a fighter is a guy that smacks things and a barbarian is a guy that smacks things without armor. And I'm like, technically that's correct, but in a way that almost feels like oh shoot, what was the word?
It feels rudimentary.
Like prejudice, like you only think about those because of the stereotypes of like that's what they traditionally fall into, but being a fighter doesn't mean that you are just one thing. There's a bunch of different things you could be as a fighter, but also when it comes down to it, you pick and choose your classes and proficiencies to get as close as the character that you want to make, not the other way around. I've seen so many people that are like, well, I was thinking about it being a ranger, but I don't know what kind of ranger I want to be. And then they're like, well, I'll be like a Beastmaster ranger, and maybe I'll get a pet or whatever. And usually those people don't have fun with their characters, don't have a good design for a character. And so I recommend going the other way, with starting with a character and then bending the rules, or like picking and choosing what you need to make it exist. And that usually tends to go better. However, there's also still a problem of like, that's just a lot of work to do. Of like, would it be better to be this kind of spellcaster or that spellcaster, and why? It's just which proficiencies do you have? What armor can you wear? What spells do you have access to? It's doing all this, extra thinking that's just really annoying, trying to get to the end result that you're looking for. So, which is better? And again, we could go into character creation in a different fashion, but basically, I don't think people should be locked into doing or being able to just have access to one thing based off of a decision that they made a long time ago. So, spellcasters should be allowed to cast spells, and non-spellcasters can do other things, but that doesn't mean that we should limit people to, you don't get to cast spells, or whatever. Is, I guess, what I'm trying to get at.
Like, yeah. So this time last year I had zero understanding of botany.
Okay.
The limit of my knowledge of botany was, I put water on plant grow.
Mm-hmm.
Plant no die.
I mean,
Hopefully.
that's kind of like 50%, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. But
sometimes it's just the amount of water and soil and whatnot.
I actually met a botanist, though.
Oh.
And the more time I spend around this botanist, and this actually does have a point here, the more I understand about botany.
Hmm.
If you correlate that to magic, Barbarian Joe, you know, he's been spending some time around the sorcerer.
Hmm.
Well, over time, he's gonna kind of start picking up. Okay, this is kind of how he does it. This is kind of okay. I may not understand all of the details, but I understand enough.
I know that when you look at the paper things that you make the flamey flames.
Exactly. And you start picking up, okay, this symbol means this. Depending on how much time you spend and how you spend that time.
Hmm.
So I find it entirely possible that by the time you get to, say, level 5, that barbarian might be able to kind of pick up and understand a spell scroll.
But see, here's the thing, is that he could literally pick up a spell sword and be able to use it instantly, and it doesn't matter his experience.
Exactly.
So
spell scrolls...
what's the difference?
Yeah, spell scrolls are in a way useful, but in a way not so much.
It just feels like someone went to a lot of time and effort and money to like make something where they put all of the spell into a piece of paper so that all you have to do is unfurl it and it just does its thing.
Yeah. And that's kind of like that is where Rule 0 comes into play very heavily with this.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, it doesn't make that much sense that a non-spellcaster should be able to cast spells, but at the same time, it doesn't make sense that a spell scroll shouldn't work in that same regard of being able to make it so that non-spellcasters can cast spells.
As it stands, you need to be a spellcaster that knows the spell or will eventually learn this spell in order to use a spell scroll. And even then, you have to 1, identify the spell scroll, and 2, make a check to use it. Unless it's something that you already have prepared, and then you can just use it as a free spell slot. But like at that point, it's just so much extra that it's not even necessary. So you gotta make a decision of like what do you want to put inhibitors on? Like, do you want to let people use it and only they make the skill check, and like all the spellcasters that know the spell can do it for free, or do they get advantage or something? So there's different things that you can do, and so in a way, this is kind of the big thing that I dislike about D&D, is that they're so vague and yet so specific at the same time that it's just really infuriating to either look something up and understand it or have the freedom to make it up on your own.
Well, that's kind of why a lot of other systems are coming out now, because of other people seeing, hey, D&D is limited and limiting.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want to be limited themselves. And a lot of that limiting is because of the vast array of all different rules that are being put out there.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm just spoiled, because my first system was literally you could build whatever you want. Like, everything was point buy. Your stats, your movement, your flips, your martial arts, your spell casting, your energy beams, your bone claws, or like transformations, flying. Like, everything was worth points, and you just bought whatever skills you wanted.
Yeah. That can be quite a beneficial system for roleplay.
It was incredibly overwhelming, though.
It can be.
Because there was just
And that,
thousands of options, and all of it was all mathed out.
yeah. And that's really where it starts getting into like how complex does the rule system need to be, and all of that. At the end of the day, the key is it's you and your friends wanting to play a game together.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these rule systems are just baseline guides. So
They're more
although
like
the
guidelines.
rules as written for a spell scroll say that you have to be a cleric to cast a cleric spell from a spell scroll, there's nothing that says that you as the DM can't say, or GM being full inclusion here.
Mm-hmm.
uh
Well, we're referring to Dungeons and Dragons rules, so
yeah. There's nothing saying that you as the game master can't modify that and say, you know what, house rule, we're going to run this so that this spell scroll is everyone can run it. There's nothing saying that you can't adjust the pricing on that either.
mm-hmm.
Because 50 gold for a level 1 spell versus 200 gold for being able to cast that repeatedly, that is kind of a bit much. So you might have a world where, hey, the printing press has been invented. And now spell scrolls are being slammed out left and right.
Oh, but now we've got a shortage of this special crystal, or like animal unicorn blood or something, for printing the spell scrolls. So now we need adventurers to go do that or something.
That's a great idea for a campaign. Or at least a part of one. Where you have what you need, but you need the resources, and the resources are difficult to find. So adventurers have to go find them because the journey to find them is dangerous. That's a possible quest idea.
Learning to read and write is also not considered common, in medieval times, which is what Dungeons and Dragons is like in reference to. So these people that not only get to go to school, but also go to school to learn magic is huge. And so when they stumble upon people in the wilderness that are like, yeah, I call upon my god's totem or whatever, and it strikes lightning, that can be infuriating. So it's kind of like this dichotomy of like, how do you balance these things? You can't really. But that's kind of the point at the same time. Because you could have this caste system of like, the non-magic users can't use magic, and that's just how it is. Or you could give them, a blessed weapon, or, maybe they could learn to read and use magic, or just randomly they pull out the spell scroll and try to make a check to use it and something could work, or I don't know. Yeah. I don't know where I was going with this. I lost track.
It's fair. I mean, one of the way they gauge literacy in medieval Europe was, could you read and write Latin? Which, when you think about it, in most cinema, the language that magic users use is Latin. So it actually, the example works really well. But I do want to mention that does not mean that people couldn't read and write in their local dialect. Literacy was significantly lower during that time frame, but the generalized literacy was still there. You'd still be able to, most people could read street signs, they could read, the shop numbers and whatnot. It was, things were in Latin, the more complex books and whatnot, those were harder for people to read because they were all in Latin, and not everybody could speak or read Latin.
Interesting trivia.
Yeah, it's kind of like handing an American a book in French and going, "Hey, read this."
Well, for wizards, it makes sense they studied it. Clerics probably know some basic words in literature from their chants or whatnot. Bards have
Yeah,
probably heard it in songs. But when you get to something like a sorcerer, well,
yeah.
how do they know how to use the spell scroll? Is it just magically imbued to the blood that when they touch it, it just explodes into lightning and it works? What about warlocks? Does
Yeah.
the patron have to read it for them or something? You know,
That is an interesting question because a warlock gets their magic through their patron.
right. So they don't actually know any magic themselves. They just know how to
Yeah.
summon, the ability of their patron. Which clerics are kind of in the same vein, but they have to
Yeah,
do it through like
they're getting
mantras
their
and
magic through
faith.
divinity.
Right.
Um, but like you said, they probably would have an understanding through their rituals and whatnot of at least the fundamentals.
Right.
And really, like,
Once
oh,
again, when I say, "Forgive me, Father, I have sinned," it is not the same as you saying, "Forgive me, Daddy, I've been a bad boy."
yeah. um, um, going
Sorry.
going a little off the rails there.
No, I was just thinking about the dichotomy between clerics and wizards, where they both have patrons, but one is more of like
Yeah.
a physical or something kind of connection, where the other is more spiritual and religious
Yeah.
based.
And it really is that way. And it doesn't make like the warlock reading a spell scroll does kind of have a bit of a confusion because it would have to be basically their patron translating it for them. But also having unless it happened to be in the language that all patrons use.
Which is Latin.
Well,
Latin
where
was
do
the
most
first
patrons come
language.
from? Most patrons in a lot of stories come from more infernal places.
Mm.
And Latin was a big prime language in Europe. It wasn't the only language though. So it could be a language that is in relation to Latin the equivalent of Aramaic, which is the predecessor to modern day Middle Eastern languages, such as Farsi and Hebrew. So it could be basically a Latin from a different region that's completely way off. That, so a wizard looking at a warlock spell scroll, if it's in a different language of that scale, it would just be random symbols to them. It'd be almost as if looking at hieroglyphs. Or like someone who doesn't speak an Asian language trying to read an Asian language. Yeah.
I was just imagining, like, the way that they have to write spell scrolls is written in such a strange way that when you read it, depending upon whether or not you know Abyssal or, like, Latin or something, like, you can still kind of read it or something. Like, it's slightly
Yeah.
skewed or, like, smudged or something. And that just got me thinking, like, how many languages are there? And there's, like, over 7,000 languages, at least currently.
Yeah. Currently in the real world, there are thousands of languages.
Do you know
Within the
Esperanto?
confines.
Or do you know the story about
Huh?
Esperanto? Esperanto was these people in the 1800s were trying to make a universal language that had little bits of everything so that everyone could understand it and be like, hey, let's all learn this universal language since we have too many. And it never caught on. So not only did they not make a universal language, but now we have another language that some people don't speak.
Yup. That actually totally makes sense. And realistically, just the way the world's going, we are eventually going to have just one language.
Oh, with the stubbornness of America, I hope it's not English, but it seems like almost everywhere people understand. At least someone's got like, well, we've got to have someone that knows English.
Pretty much.
I hate English so much. I hate English almost as much as I hate D&D. Because again, it's the same idea of like, there's so many rules, there's so many regulations, and then there's even more exceptions to those rules.
Yeah.
I'm still learning
but
stuff.
in D&D, there's only like 30-something languages. Which is more than enough within the confines of D&D.
Oh, yeah. And they keep adding language every single time they introduce a new race or species or something.
Yeah.
Which sucks.
They
There's
haven't
like
added one in a
5
while,
different
which is
bird
good.
languages. Because there's Kenku, there's Vidalcan, there's Aarakocra.
Oh yeah, there's the specific ones that like are that only this individual species speaks it, but that all of the members of that species also speak other languages.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, generally speaking, like Celestial and Infernal would have 2 different languages that they'd be based off of.
Mm-hmm.
The language of the wizard would be different than the language of the so that kind of like, as I'm thinking about it, that could be a kind of an explanation of like why, but then you have the cross-referencing where it's, hey, this spell happens to be from all of these lists, so that one spell would have to be in a language connection that all of those would have to understand.
See, here's the thing, is that if we even take something like Magic Missile, which is like the #1 like prerogative spell, like everybody should know this spell, not every class has access to that spell. I'm pretty sure that only Wizard has access to everything. Wizard, Sorcerer, I know that Warlock doesn't. I don't think Cleric or Paladin do. Bard might, but Bard has kind of access to everything as well. So it's just kind of like... Go ahead.
Magic Missile and Fireball are the 2 original spells.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, they are the 2 spells that were in 1E.
Right.
But it's now only available to sorcerers and wizards.
Okay.
So, I mean, granted, in 1E, they weren't called sorcerer, they weren't called wizard,
Right,
warlock,
they were just
anything like that.
spellcaster.
It was magic user.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's, way back in the 1980s, that's more gee whiz information. But it doesn't make sense that those would only be used, that Magic Missile would only be used by sorcerers and wizards if it's one of the originals. And I've done a house rule where certain spells can be used by all magic users because they're like, hey, this is something that makes sense that every magic user would be able to have in a society.
Mm-hmm. But this is the reason why you see most people asking for magic items as opposed to spell scrolls. Because really, spell
Yes.
scrolls are only useful to wizards or something.
Pretty much.
Because look at it this way. Rules as written, even if you were to make a spell scroll from one of your, magic spells, you wouldn't be able to just, like, cast it into a piece of paper, overnight. It would take days. It would take so much money in order to make it. And then even if you did make it, who would you be able to sell it to? You couldn't sell it to, your fellow party members. You couldn't sell it to any random Joe Schmo in town. You would literally have to take it to a spell school or a king, at which point, once again, they probably already have access to spellcasters and things like that. So,
Yeah.
I just don't understand the purpose for a spell scroll other than to spend a bunch of money for an extra spell slot.
Which,
I just,
at the end of the day,
don't-
that is kind
I
of
don't
the
get it.
end result.
I don't understand why.
That's also probably why they dropped the price of them so much. From a 9th level spell scroll being, 250,000 gold to make to 50,000 gold to make. Because it didn't make sense to have them that high. So and honestly, maybe in the future they'll drop them even further. But like you said, it's still, even at current prices, it doesn't make as much sense as having a standard magic item that does that for you.
Right. Because you could make a spell scroll of magic missile in one day for 25 gold pieces and be able to sell it for 50. But, I mean, who really wants, something that temporary? And maybe this is just me, where I just don't like temporary stuff. This is the reason why I don't craft items in most games, even video games. And I also don't like casting spells that give temporary buffs, even if they're like a lot or whatever. I mean, the Elden Ring community has like shown the memes of what it is to like spend 20 minutes casting 50 different spells just for, spells to override each other or like end after a duration, and then walk into a fight that you get, killed in 2 hits. I just don't understand temporary
we took
buffs.
too long casting the spells.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just makes more sense to spend the time and money into either crafting or purchasing something that is permanently imbued into an item that, maybe when it recharges has a chance of, disintegrating for whatever reason. But at least you have more usage out of it, longevity.
And that, that is the case. It makes more sense to have the other things. And,
I just came
looking
here to
at-
say the spell scrolls are stupid and I hate them.
yeah, pretty much. Another thing about spell scrolls is how long it takes to make them.
Mm.
Like, I can see, making a spell scroll a day, I can see that.
Yeah. Because it's
Level
literally
9
just
spell
writing it
scroll
out.
takes 120 days to write.
Honestly, that might be like the game changer, is that it may cost a lot of money. It may even cost a lot of like attention or like carefulness or whatever. Like certain spells you may not even be able to do like on the road. You would have to do like at a town, or at least on a table,
Yeah.
But if you could do it in, a day or two, honestly, for like 9th level spells, I wouldn't mind if they took a week, because you need to be very specific. You need to be very careful. Maybe there's a lot of incantations to write out. That's fine. But like, having it take years and
Well, at the
still
same time, this
cost
has to
$1
be
billion.
something- At the same time, this still has to be something that you can cast in 6 seconds.
and then it could still not work. The fact that it could not work is just baffling to me. Even if you are a spellcaster, even if this is a spell that, even if you've ticked off every single box, you still have to make a check, and it could just fizzle into nothing.
Well, I mean, if you're casting it, then you're not and it's something that you would have, and it's at the level you would have. You don't need to make that check.
Let's see.
It's if you're trying
the
to
spell's
cast
on your class spell
level.
list, but of a higher level than you can normally cast, then you make the spell check.
Yeah. So it's not that, if I'm a level 5 wizard trying to cast a cantrip off of a spell, or trying to cast a level 1 spell off of a spell scroll, that I wouldn't
you
be
would
able
need to hit a 13.
But because I'm a level 5 wizard,
You should be
and
able
that's
to
on my
automatically do
list,
it.
I'm automatically able to do it. So, but if I was a level 1 wizard trying to cast a level 5 spell, then I'm making a check to see if I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's where the difference really is. And yeah, by the time you get to the point where that spell scroll is really, truly, fully powerful and useful, it is kind of moot in a lot of cases, unless it's like a spell that you won't be needing often. So it's not worth keeping it prepared.
Right.
Like maybe Featherfall.
Yeah, exactly. In which case, it's kind of nice to just have like a one use of it or something, just around.
Yeah.
I think maybe where I've gotten this idea from is games like Baldur's Gate or Divinity, where like literally anyone can hold on to these, one-time use spells. Which like, even that in and of itself is like a rarity, like to find them. But then you also kind of understand that this is a one-time use. So it's like having special ammunition or whatever.
Yeah.
Of like having an arrow that like knocks someone back or like shoots a net or something.
Yeah, it's I think that's the biggest use of it, is the spells that aren't common need.
Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, everyone would want, like, a spell scroll of Fireball. But the only people that can use it are, like, the cleric and the sorcerer and the wizard,
Yeah.
So it's like, well, why are we giving spell scrolls to those guys? They're probably not going to need them anyways.
Exactly. Like, it might not always be useful for a wizard to have, say, the friends cantrip.
Mm.
So that might help in a specific circumstance, but normally that'd be something that they'd be fine with. And warlocks tend to base a lot of stuff off charisma anyways. So the friends cantrip is kind of low usage for them to begin with, because it gives advantage on charisma checks directed towards one creature that isn't hostile.
See,
So,
I would want a cup or canteen with friends cast on it. Like the assassin's teacup or something, of like when I activate it and like give someone a drink, it like makes friends cast on them.
That's actually kind of useful.
Mm-hmm. That's actually where the idea for the proximity wine is that I made. Do you remember that?
Where it's
You
basically
uncork the bottle, and anyone in the proximity of the wine gets the effects of drunk, which is, I think, like the poison condition or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's similar to the ever smoking bottle. You know, when you're in proximity to it, you can't see because it's a smoke. Let me propose this to you. Let's say someone does have a spell of, let's say, fireball. You know, just for kicks and giggles. Someone has it in their bag, and you're all getting, you know, settled down for the evening. They place their bag on the ground, then they go to, you know, get comfortable, and they kind of lean on it, maybe sit on the bag. The paper crumples. What happens to that spell that's all rolled up in there? Does it go off? If so, then why does it require so much, you know, activity and reciting for it to work, even for it to fail? Or does it get destroyed? And if which case, can it be repaired, and how so?
So in my mind, neither. Because we're just talking it's getting crumpled up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's able to be uncrumpled and read.
So it's the actual reading of it, the reciting of the spell that makes it activate. It has nothing to do with any magic actually imbued into the paper.
So that's kind of my understanding of it. There's some magic imbued into the paper because it makes it so you don't need to worry about the component cost. But beyond that, there is no...
They've just got the material components like pasted to it with like a little piece of sticky tape. Like when you get a mint next to your receipt.
Yeah, pretty much. You know, it's like, you know, I think Fireball is like bat guano is one of the ingredients.
Mm-hmm. I know Gust of Wind is beans.
Yeah. So you just pull out a Gust of Wind scroll and just a bag of beans with it.
Message is a piece of wire. I think because it's like you're supposed to hold it up to your ear like a cup and wire. And then my favorite one is, I think, like, I don't remember what it is. I think it's like Mind Shield or something, like it protects you from scrying or like getting your mind read. And it's literally a piece of tinfoil. It's so good, right?
Oh yeah. And a lot of magic spells don't actually use up the physical components.
No, just big stuff like Revivify.
Yeah. So it would only be those specific ones that use up those components that we really need to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it just
They just writ the spell scroll with bat guano.
Yeah.
That would be a really stinky scroll.
At least for a few days.
Oh, what is this? Scroll of stink cloud? Technically, yes. With a little bit of produce flame.
But yeah, as far as my understanding of it goes, it's not until the words are spoken that the spell is cast.
So spell scrolls do need to be read, and they need to be read aloud, is how you do it.
If the spell has a verbal component.
Okay.
So Like friends doesn't have a verbal component. It has a somatic, which is motions, and a material component, which is a small amount of makeup. um, so in this case, if I have a scroll of friends, my understanding of it is I still have to make some sort of physical motion while I'm reading this. I may not have to read it out loud, but I still have to make some form of physical motion.
You're just doing the
Because-
YMCA.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, that's kind of what bards do. They just do the Macarena and they hip thrust a fireball at somebody.
Yeah. Because it does say, you can cast the spell using its normal casting time and without providing any material components.
Right. Because it's already in there.
Yeah.
But I assume that's not excluding the verbal or somatic components the spell may
Correct.
require.
So you still have to do the motions and speak the words if it requires being spoken. Pending you don't have like silent casting or something like that.
No, I'm just thinking about ritual casting spells where you have to like do the somatic components or verbal components for 10 minutes.
Ritual casting is so much fun for a lot of things.
Well, I'm just thinking about Purify Food and Drink where someone's doing like the Italian pose for 10 minutes over someone's poison glass.
He's just sitting there doing the chicken dance or something.
Oh, you're just doing this for 10 minutes.
Yeah. The classic Italian, hand pose.
Mm-hmm.
with the
Fingers together
up.
upwards.
Yeah.
And the somatic components are just saying Mamma Mia for 10 minutes.
Not approved, not approved, not approved, approved.
Very good.
Full credit for that to the original creator of that particular element.
I actually, do ritual casting require verbal, somatic, or material components?
Ritual casting requires everything but the spell slot.
Interesting. Okay.
So, but it has to be something that you can ritually cast.
Right. There's very specific instances where you can ritual cast stuff.
Yeah. Like identify
Mm-hmm.
is a ritual. I lost this one. There it is. It's a spell you can cast ritually. You still need a pearl worth at least 100 gold and an owl feather, which should be easy enough to attain if you're an owlin. And you still need the vocal and somatic components.
Oh, okay,
So-
interesting. So there are some spells that just have the option of being cast ritually.
Correct. That's all it really is. Is just some spells have the option of being cast ritually, and those that can be cast ritually, you're just adding 10 minutes to the casting time to do so without using a spell slot.
I knew that there were some feats or like things that you could do where you could learn a spell from another class, but you can only ritual cast it, meaning that you can't use it in combat, you can't use a spell slot for it, you can only spend 10 minutes to like do a ritual in order to do it.
In those cases, I think those feats in particular kind of bypass the ritual casting element of the spell
Well,
itself.
Can you imagine being able to ritual cast Fireball?
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Like,
Is
what would
in
that even look
instance,
like?
I
Is that like 10 minutes of nothing and then suddenly a fireball exploding? Or would it be like 10 minutes of you like slowly growing the size of a tiny fireball.
I'm honestly picturing like the Naruto hand things.
Oh, a spirit bomb? I was thinking
Yeah.
of when Aang from Avatar Last Airbender learned how to do firebending.
Oh yes, and he's doing the dragon dance.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a vocal, somatic, and material
Okay.
requiring bat guano and sulfur.
Right.
Um, and so if you're able to ritually cast this, instead of it being 6 seconds or less of doing some motions and then
Sorry, I'm
you're sitting there
just.
for 10 minutes dancing around and chanting and
But
holding up
it.
a bag of
Do you
sulfur
think
and
it's a
back.
different kind of motion, or are you just doing that 1-2 second motion like 600 times?
Super duper slowly,
Oh, you're just doing it
like
super
high
slow.
G slow.
Gotcha. Like Master Oogway casting a fireball.
Yeah. I like honestly, that's a role play thing. Like that's how. What do you think would be the best way to do this?
That would actually
And
be
like,
really fun to do, like a turtle character that only casts ritual spells, because they're just really slow.
they're just like super slow, and they're just like 10 minutes into the fight, they finally cast fireball. Oh, that'd be hilarious.
That
It
would
wouldn't
actually be really cool, because that is like very story, of like, okay, we got to protect the spellcaster while they do this thing, and so like, 5 rounds later they finally cast a spell and like win the battle or something. That would be cool, actually. I would love to run a game like that, or be in a game like that.
Like that would be one that would be very hard to do.
You'd kind of need a small group, I think. Like maybe
Yeah.
3 or 4 people.
And you would also probably have to modify, because ritual casting is 10 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
which is 100 rounds.
Maybe make that an NPC, so like the party's just
Yeah.
defending them while they do a thing.
Yeah, and they're just like, yeah, he's not really super powerful, but he's a fun guy to hang around.
Or maybe he has
That
to
would
like
definitely
ritual
be
cast the dispel magic so that he can get through the gate. But while he's trying to do that, there's a bunch of like, I don't know, scorpions come out or something. You gotta protect him while he's trying to disenchant the door. I don't know. That could be a fun encounter.
That could be.
Like a Indiana Jones kind of thing.
Giving me ideas over here.
Snapes. Why does it always have to be Snapes? 12 points to the Matrix.
12 points to the barbarian.
Dumbledore. Anywho, we're a little bit off
Anyways,
topic. What were we talking about?
We've
Spell
gone
scrolls.
so far off topic, it's insane.
Crafting.
Yes, crafting.
Because the whole point of this discussion is that I was making an alchemist character, and we were trying to decide, can I just cast spells and disguise them, or like basically flavor text them as not actually magical and it's just items? And if so, is it possible for me to make things like potions or what? And maybe we could just do potions in another. No, I feel like potions are like crafting magic items. It's all sort of one thing.
It really is.
Like the whole point of like downtime crafting anything kind of comes down to like, oh, how much is it worth? Well, it's, you need that much materials to craft it. And, depending upon what type of rarity it is, it costs more and takes more time. And I'm like, that makes sense. But holy jeez. If you want to make slippers of spider climbing, you better be able to spend 2 months and 360 gold pieces on it. Which, honestly, slippers of spider climbing is terrible. Because if you put on slippers and you tried to climb a wall, there's no way you're staying in those slippers. You're flying right out of those things.
Yup. You would have to walk backwards up the wall.
Mm-hmm.
That would be unique.
Yeah. Unless it's not the traditional slip-on kind of slippers, and if it's actual like loafer, then maybe. There's also the magical attunement of like it shapes itself perfectly to you or something, which I'm really glad that they added that in, because that would make magic items a lot less useful for different kinds of people. Imagine an orc trying to use a cloak of invisibility and he's using it like a bib. Look, someone blew a hole in me.
So, within the context of the making of potions, a standard potion of healing costs 25 gold and takes 8 hours to make. My understanding is that equates to 25 gold worth. Well, technically 50 gold worth. Because when you're crafting something, you're using half cost materials. So for every 8 hours, you have 50 gold worth of a potion. So potions are separately listed for pricing, I believe.
They are in the new thing. They used to be just considered magic items, which, were common, uncommon, rare, very rare, legendary, and then they basically went up thousands. And like months of creation.
Yeah. Now they are separately priced, and I have to find that pricing thing.
Character who's proficient with an herbalism kit can spend 25 GP and 8 hours of work. It's like it's a tiny sentence just kind of thrown in there.
Yeah.
In between scribing spell scrolls and other magic items.
Yeah. And that's making specifically a standard potion of healing.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the only potion that they have actually described making in this.
Correct.
So, because all of the other things are based off of how much gold it's worth.
Right.
In correlation to how long it takes. My understanding is if you have a 200 gold potion you're trying to make, being a potion of healing is a 50 gold potion, I would say that'd be 4 8-hour sessions of making it and 50 gold or 100 gold.
And see, I subscribe to your idea of, I think it all takes the same amount of time, but depending upon how powerful or, what level of CR or,
yeah,
the greater of the potion or the more powerful of the spell takes more resources to make.
Yeah. And that's something that I want to work with more as a house rule.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of the time the potion is just you're mixing the potion.
Right.
The additional, everything else is, you're either letting the potion sit and do its thing, or it's done. And, I'm not by any means a real alchemist or anything like that. Alchemy is really just chemistry. But from old alchemy books that I've read, it basically operates off of a system of you do this, and then you wait, and then you do this, and then you wait.
Right.
And
And,
then
I
when
understand
you're
the
done,
concept of waiting. Like that
yeah.
is good.
So, like, I could see, like, hey, I'm making a potion of greater healing. Okay. You have the material components for it. You have the cost. You have half the cost of it for components.
Hmm.
You spend 8 hours making it, and now you just have to wait.
Right.
And then after X amount of time, it's done.
And I like it being like 8 hours because that is a long rest, so you could do that. But also, it
Exactly.
kind of like it evens it out because, if you make something that's really quick and easy, well, it takes hours. Well, can I do it faster? No, it takes 8 hours. Okay, well, what if I do something that's, even much better than that? Does it take longer? No, it's still 8 hours. Oh, interesting. So then there's like this cost-effective thing of like, what's the perfect, amount of time and materials that you want to invest in something? Because, you can't speed up like a good cup of coffee or tea or something. It takes this long.
Exactly.
Doesn't matter what kind of tea or leaves you use or beans or whatever. Like it takes a certain amount of time. It's brewing water. It's like it's all science. It's just a matter of like at which consistency you like introduce things to each other or whatever. But
Exactly.
this concept of like putting things into a general time thing, I, I, I it just doesn't really make sense to me because I know how long it takes to make like a sheet of a breastplate, and technically speaking, a breastplate has more AC than a chain shirt. However, a breastplate should not take longer than a chain shirt should take to make. Because I know that
No.
a breastplate can be hammered out in like an afternoon. Meanwhile, a chain shirt would probably take a day or two to make by hand. And that's just kind of how that works. But I understand that they can't do that. I just think it's annoying that to make a chain, full suit of armor would probably take about 3 weeks. But a +1 suit of armor would take 3 years. And I just don't really understand that.
Yeah, that is all about the imbuing of the magic in it,
Right.
which that's a different animal in and of itself.
But see, here's my perspective. If you've got a sword, someone can make a better sword, and it doesn't have to be magical, which is why I like introducing +1 variants of items that aren't magical, so they don't give you, resistance to non-magical damage, or, a +1 weapon is not magical to overcome resistance, it's just a +1 weapon. It's just a better weapon. It's more finely crafted or whatnot. So it's not as expensive as the magical +1, but it still does the effect of a +1.
Yeah. My favorite magical item is the oil of honing
Oh,
for the standard magic items. It's literally oil that you use to sharpen a blade, a sword, a dagger, what have you. And it gives it a +1 through 3 value, depending on what grade the oil is.
okay.
You're literally just sharpening your sword.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's all it really is. You're just making your sword really sharp.
Yeah. And let me guess, that's probably cheaper than buying the original thing.
Let me take a look. It might actually be.
Because I remember I made a few items like that in my Curse of Strahd game, where there was like a whetstone, there was a firestone, Uh, there's some couple other things, but basically I treated it like the paper in Bloodborne, which I don't know if you ever used Bloodborne or played Bloodborne, but basically it
No.
allowed you to apply a status effect to your weapon, so it would become magical to overcome resistances and whatnot. And then in addition to the standard damage of your weapon, it did like an extra d6 of like lightning or fire damage or something. But it would take an hour, or it would take like 10 minutes to apply it to your weapon, and it would last for an hour. Or you could use a bonus action to apply it to your next hit. So you had the option of like, if you got surprised, you could still like strike it on there to give like a little boost, which, you know, I feel like there's not enough uses for bonus actions, and people are always like, oh, I've got a bonus action. Is there anything I can do? Let me look in my character sheet for 10 minutes. You know, I'm just like, everyone has an action and a movement. And sometimes, very rarely, people get to do multiple things in their action. We try to ignore those. And then
so
even more rare than that, sometimes people have a bonus action. Go ahead.
the oil of sharpness is the same. It's a straight up +3,
Mm-hmm.
but it costs the same as a +3 weapon.
You can just apply it to whatever you want.
You can apply it to any melee weapon or 20 pieces of ammunition.
Oh, so you
That-
don't apply it to a bow, you apply it to ammunition.
These have to be non-magical and deal slashing or piercing damage in order to be effective. Applying the oil takes 1 minute, after which it magically seeps into whatever it coats, turning the coated weapon into a +3 weapon or coated ammunition into +3 ammunition.
That's huge.
That is huge. It's 20,000 gold. The same price as a +3, you know, it's
Makes sense,
basically-
though.
Yeah.
That's
It's
huge.
basically you
I
can
need to
take
give that as a
non-magical
reward
weapon.
sometime.
Yeah, that's I love that idea.
Because here's the thing.
Because
You're not just like giving them a thing of like, oh man, do they want a shield? Do they want armor? Do they want a weapon? You just give them the oil, and then they get to be like, oh my goodness, this would be perfect for this. Or they're like, wait, what if we hold on to this for like an even better thing that we'll get down the road? Because then you put it in their hands. And this is like, again, a perfect example of like how best to lead people. Is like, give them the options and let them make their own decisions. And you don't necessarily have to even steer them in a direction. You can just be like, here's a thing. Do something with it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
it is. And another thing that I noticed in the new rule set,
Mm-hmm.
there is absolutely nothing that says that you can't enchant magic items stacking them. As a matter
Well,
of fact, I think it's actually
the oil
specifies
said that it
you
has to be
can
applied to
stack.
something that's not magical.
Correct. The oil itself has to be applied to non-magical. But the +3 enchantment, if you want to take the time to do that, doesn't.
So you could take a +3 sword and then enchant it with +3 to make it +6?
No.
Okay,
So-
I didn't think so.
You can't enchant multiple of the same enchantment. But imagine this. You have a rogue
Mm-hmm.
who is running an oath bow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now, over time, that oath bow gets enchanted to a +3 oath bow.
Okay.
And they have arrows that are enchanted to +3 arrows. And then those arrows get enchanted to be arrows of slaying. So now, I believe arrows of slaying do an extra d6 of damage against the given type of creature.
Okay, wait. So hold on. If you have a +3 bow and +3 ammo, does that make it
Now you have
+6?
+6.
Okay. That's where it gets.
That's where the additions start adding up.
Mmm.
So now you have a +3 oath bow, which an oath bow does more damage than a standard longbow. And you have +3 ammo, +3 bow. So now it's a +6 overall as long as you're using that ammunition. So all of this adds up to a very scary situation in which whatever you are hunting that you've set up this thing for could be taking a rather significant amount of damage, especially being that this is a rogue if you're doing a sneak attack.
Mm-hmm. So you're starting off with a +12 to hit.
Pretty much.
You have advantage.
And you're doing an extra 6 points of damage.
And see, here I was thinking, I was like, oh, oil of, that sounds like a cool, that might be a thing that my character could learn to make. No, there's no way he's going to give me that.
Plus, the oath bow is assuming you went longbow for starters, you would have a longbow that does an additional 3d6 damage against your sworn enemy. So you now have that 3d6 on top of the d8 +6 because of the +3 ammo. And we'll go to, I believe, Arrow of Dragon Slaying is a good one.
For those of you at home that don't know what an oath bow is, the oath bow, you can make a command phrase when you make a ranged attack. The target of your attack becomes your sworn enemy until it dies or until dawn 7 days later. You can have only one sworn enemy at a time. When your sworn enemy dies, you can choose a new one. When you make a ranged attack roll, this is basically like Hunter's Mark from Rangers. When you make a ranged attack roll with this weapon against your sworn enemy, you have advantage on the roll. In addition, your target gains no benefit from cover other than total cover, and you suffer no disadvantage due to long range. If the attack hits, your sworn enemy takes an extra 3d6 piercing damage. While your sworn enemy lives, you have disadvantage on attack rolls with all other weapons. So basically, it does 3d6 damage +6. So. And then what's the Dragon Slaying do?
So ammunition of slaying, for those that are sitting at home and don't know this yet, is ammunition, magical ammunition meant to slay creatures of a particular type, which is chosen by either DM or randomly from a table. If the creature of that type takes damage from this ammunition, the creature makes a DC 17 con save.
Oh.
An extra 6d10 force damage on a fail, or half that on a success.
Oh my goodness gracious.
So,
okay, question. If you loaded that into an oath bow and made something your target enemy, that doesn't change the ammunition, correct? Like you just randomly find a quiver of like arrows of goblin slaying or whatever, you know?
So if you find arrows of, say, giant slaying, and you're going after say a fiend, those arrows of giant slaying aren't going to do the damage to the fiend.
They're just going to be acting like normal arrows.
Correct.
Will they be considered magical to overcome resistance?
Well, it does say magic ammunition, so
Okay,
I would say
so there you go. So you might have to use them in a pinch, if you have to, but not a.
I
not
would
a
say
good use.
it'd be better to have a set of +1 ammunition on hand
Yeah.
because that'd be a lot cheaper.
Yeah. No, I know.
Because +1 ammo is uncommon, whereas ammo of slaying is very rare.
Look, I'm just imagining, because I can imagine a situation, either where I'm as the dungeon master or player, where we go through a dungeon and we find some arrows of, like, I don't know, dragon slaying, and we go through, like, this dungeon of, like, magma and rock and whatnot, and, like, at the end there's, like, some, wizard or something. I was going to call him a bad name, but I'm not going to say that.
Yeah.
Some hick wizard.
There's a humanoid that you have to deal with.
Exactly.
Yeah, that would.
So, if you cast polymorph on it, no, I'm just kidding. But like, actually, let's make it like a vampire. Like someone that you clearly need magical damage to. Well, your oath bow is magical, but not your ammo. So you're not going to be able to do any damage to him because you're only dealing physical damage. What?
So, the oath bow being magical, the arrows fired from the oath bow will still do damage.
What? That's not how that works.
So, a magical weapon makes all of the ammunition magical for the purpose of overcoming resistances.
Who says? Show me the written law.
Let me take a look.
Because this is one of the reasons why I specifically engineered like weapons such as firearms or bows that were like, this is literally a fire bow. It ignites the ammunition put into it and makes it fire damage. Because I knew that wasn't a thing. I knew that you needed like special ammunition or something. And which is why a lot of like the bows and whatnot that you get just give you things such as like advantage but not extra damage. They just kind of do extra things for you, like marking a target so that you can see them behind cover, or having advantage to hit them or something. I never seen anything about a bow giving like extra damage to whatever it is that you're shooting.
Let me take a look here.
Okay. We'll have to talk about potions in another.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like, potions are kind of their own thing, just because I kind of want to talk about, like, how you can use them, whether or not they need to be, like, drunken, or you can splash them and things, like, because I think there is a difference between potions and flasks, but, again, we can talk about that on a different session. Yeah. Basically, this this episode was to talk about how much I hate, I just hate. I hate D&D. I hate, spell scrolls. I hate how ridiculous it is sometimes. But yeah, let your spell scrolls do whatever you want them to do, fellas. That's all we're trying to say. You're in control of the adventure. I'm just trying to fill space while you're looking this up. Trying to think of something. Let's see. What's the difference between scribing a spell scroll? So, I know that wizards can take spell scrolls. And actually, this is written in the base rules, is that a wizard spell on a spell scroll can be copied just as spells and spell books can be copied. When a spell is copied from a spell scroll, the copier must succeed on an intelligence arcana check of a d10 plus the spell's level. The check succeeds, the spell is successfully copied. So it used to be that you didn't even have to spend a bunch of money and whatnot, copying the spell from a spell scroll into your wizard's book, because all the material components were already there. Which I don't understand why you couldn't do that from another wizard's spell. Or I think you could take spells from a spell book into another. But anyways, they changed it. So now, scribing a spell scroll takes an amount of time and money related to the level of the spell the character wants to scribe, as shown as the spell scroll cross table. In addition, the character must have proficiency in Arcana skill, and must provide any material components required for the casting of the spell. Moreover, the character must have the spell prepared, or it must be among the character's known spells in order to scribe the scroll of that spell. Crafting a spell scroll is a solitary task, unlikely to attract much attention. The complications that arise are more likely to involve the preparation needed for the activity. Every work week spent scribing brings a 10% chance of a complication, examples of which are on the scribe scroll complications table. Okay, so even better. Not only could, scribing Fireball take 4 work weeks, but in those 4 work weeks, you have a chance of something happening. One complication is you bought up the last of the rare ink used to craft scrolls, angering a wizard in town. The priest of a temple of good accuses you of trafficking in dark magic. A wizard eager to collect one of your spells in a book presses you to sell the scroll. Due to a strange error in creating the scroll, it is instead a random spell of the same level. Oh joy. The rare parchment you bought for your scroll has a barely visible map on it, and a thief attempts to break into your work world. And both 2 and 6, a thief or a dark magician, has the asterisk for might involve a rival, because who doesn't love rivals? Oh, so fun. But yes, it is now changed that you need not only proficiency in the Arcana skill, but you need proficiency with Calligrapher's Surprise. So you now have to have proficiency with being able to write good. You still need to have the materials. Scrolls spell uses your spell save DC, as opposed to the generic 10 DC, which is nice. So if you are a high level spellcaster, you can increase the potency of your spell now. That's good. Are you still looking it up?
Yeah, I found something from 3.5.
Okay.
But I'm not seeing anything specifically stated in the 5e or the 2024.
Basically, my point was that there wasn't anything about any magic, bows that said that they turn ammunition into magical.
Yeah.
So unless
That's
you can find
like
something that proves to the contrary, there just isn't anything to say one way or the other whether or not a magic bow does that. So I always assumed that it didn't. Because there are magical ammunition, and bows don't state that they turn things magical.
Yeah, in 3.5 it actually did state that magic bows imbued magic into the ammunition.
Oh, so maybe you're thinking about that, maybe?
Maybe. And that's just the way that I've always run it, and the way that all DMs I've played under, you accepted, have run it. I never actually did ranged weapons under you, so. Let's see. So it was just kind of like, this is the way it is.
There is a D&D Beyond forum.
Yes. I've looked at the forum and they all say, like, they're all saying the same thing, where it's like a magic bow imparts magical property onto its ammunition. But all the actual references I'm finding are from 3.5.
Gotcha.
So the general consensus among most DMs is that magical bows make the ammunition magical. But I'm
There's
not
nothing
seeing
written.
specific references in the 5e or 2024 books
All right.
here.
Well, we tried.
We did.
Mhm.
There is no blanket rule saying that a magical weapon bypasses any resistances.
The only blanket rule is that there is no blanket rule.
Pretty much. I'm always going to run it as the magic bow or magic weapon imbues the magic into the ammunition, because otherwise it doesn't make that much sense for me.
Well, here's the
Partly
thing, is that for the most part, it usually doesn't matter. We kind of just like deal damage and we forget whether or not things have resistances to like non-magical damage anyways.
Yeah.
Unless of course it's something important like this is, the Demon King and whatnot. And then at which point you'll like make the stipulation of like your arrows clatter off his skin, dealing no damage. But you usually only bring that up if you're trying to like be finicky about it.
Exactly.
So.
And that is one thing I try not to be.
Well, you usually don't worry about it, and that's kind of like the whole point about it.
Yeah.
So unless you want to be like, because I'm going to be introducing magic bows and ammunition, I'm going to make this stipulation. But for the most part, there's about a billion things that we could probably cover before we start a campaign, but usually we just hop into it and then be like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What are your rules on that?
Pretty much. Like, generally speaking, when you're developing a campaign, you have a baseline concept and the starting area figured out.
Mm.
Everything beyond that, you might have like a kind of a general idea, but you're not going to have enough details because you probably don't want that much for details.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that the reason why you may not is because you shouldn't. Because if you have plans for everything, and, the second that it gets off of that, how are you going to react? Are you going to freak out? Are you going to shut down? Are you going to be mad? Are you going to piss your pants and whine?
Yeah.
Or are you going to force everyone else to not be happy to get back into what you've got planned?
Exactly. And, like, I could set up an entire map for the party to explore and have 100 magic items in that map, so that the intent is they'll find these magic items as they're exploring it,
Eventually.
and those are the magic items they're going to have to use.
Mm-hmm. And they could still find none of them.
Exactly. Or I could go, you know what? As they're exploring this, they're going to find a magic item.
Hmm. And that's why it's sometimes kind of better that I'm just like, when they've, achieved a thing, they get a reward, which is kind of why I like milestone better than XP as well. Of just like, when I feel like it, when I feel like it's enough of a reward, I will give people stuff. Because sometimes I'll get to a point in a campaign where I'm like, there's been loot around, and they've leveled up, and they just don't have much. I feel like I need to, like, let a noble walk by and drop his trousers or something. Like, I need to get these guys money.
Just a noble walks by, and his belt's a little loose, his coin purse falls on the ground, he doesn't notice.
Oh, thank you so much for saving me. Have 10,000 gold pieces.
Yeah.
This is my lunch money.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to dine at Chateau La Riche. Now I'm just going to go to McDonald's.
Oh, but yeah, kind of coming back to the original concept of why we're starting this is that I have a character that's doing crafting, and I hate crafting because it's like, one, managing resources, time, money, and it's just kind of going out of the way to be like, hey, Dungeon Master, can we spend 10 minutes discussing something that has no impact on anybody else, that may not result into anything of value? I dislike that. So I'm like, are there better ways to do it? And we looked at the new rules, and no, there's not. So I think I genuinely just don't want to do any more crafting. And he's given me 300 gold pieces worth of crafting materials, and I don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Which,
not unless
honestly,
we go to your rule of like, I can make one thing per night, and I just spend a bunch of money on it.
Which, honestly, as a house rule, I am fine with.
Okay.
Because, for the most part, you will be kind of, like, most of the time, crafting a potion is waiting.
But also,
Yeah.
there are other things that you can do to stop me from crafting potions other than, like, trying to balance time and resources. Of, like, there may not be an opportunity for me to craft something. We may want to be pushing through that, or I need to be watching something else, or, maybe I just don't have enough crafting resources. I might have money on me, but I don't have crafting resources on me. So,
or
I didn't go
hey, this
good on my
potion has been
scrounging check.
brewing for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, it got corked.
And that's the other opportunity, too, is that if we ever do get, like, on a boat for something for 3 weeks, then we could do some downtime activities of, like, okay, what's something that you could do in a couple weeks' time of, like, working on something? That's kind of when I think downtime activities were sort of meant for. But a lot of time it just kind of feels like, oh, you made it to your first town. Who wants to spend, 2.5 months making their first plate mail?
Yeah. Like, that's, like, I'm okay with, like, I'm okay with the idea of, you have your bastion, and you kind of return to home base every so often. You just spend, like, a couple of weeks kind of recovering and whatnot. That's perfectly fine. And for some campaigns, that's going to work brilliantly.
Mm-hmm.
For others, it's not.
Yeah.
And that's going to depend on the campaign.
As a person that couldn't get my party out of the tutorial town for, I want to say 40 sessions, don't. Get them out of there. Get them going. Get them doing something.
It's
Constantly bringing
one
the
thing-
excitement to them just isn't as fun. I gotta be
No,
honest.
I would definitely do, like, if you have your home base, have that be more of a place of rest.
Mm.
And then have it be like, hey, there's a new adventure that, or like, hey, there's a rumor of some super rare magical item, or hey,
Our potato farm got attacked.
There's a new settlement that needs some help.
There's a new settlement. No.
A settlement has come to need your help.
We need to get the 60-second men over there.
Yeah.
Oh goodness. Well, any final thoughts?
Honestly, at the end of the day, it all boils down to rule 0.
Yeah. Gosh dang it. I hate always coming back to this of like, you get to make your own decisions. Like,
At the end of the day, that's what it is. It's
it
a
all
role-playing game.
depends. It all depends.
You know, in role-playing games, rules are like rules for pirates. They're more just
like
guidelines.
guidelines. All right.